and welcome back. So, as we all know, that going outside is a terrible thing with the coronavirus restrictions, and there have been fines. In fact, for breaching the lockdown rules, we have seen 17,000 fines for lockdown breaches from the police within the United Kingdom. So they're clearly taking this very seriously. Boris Johnson has updated to say you can have gatherings of up to 6 people from 2 different households. How fantastic, how very thoughtful that we can instead of groups of 2 people. Of course, with this then you can't have meetings of people who might be dissenting to the governmental ways of doing things. That it's a good way to stop potential protests, which of course is going to be what this is all about. That Boris Johnson was aware of this and therefore came out to say that Black Lives Matter, but we must fight this virus as well. As Boris Johnson says, protesters have the right to make their feeling known as long as social distancing rules are maintained. So obviously they have to be lawful and legal, which means they've got to be peaceful, and because of the coronavirus restrictions, they also have to be 6 feet apart, and no more than 6 people gathering. So for the Black Lives Matter protest, you can have 6 people. That's what he's saying. Not quite how it followed though, was it? And bear in mind that if you do break these guidelines for the fines, that it's a £60 fine, but if paid within 14 days, it's only a £30 fine. But then we see what's been happening, and as you can see, the people here in these photos, they don't care about the social distancing guidelines at all. So it's going to be the same groups of people who previously were saying, oh, but if you're going outside, that means you don't care about people, and you're basically killing the old, killing the sick, killing anybody really, because the coronavirus is so deadly. And of course, some of these protesters are wearing masks. How many is that to actually be the case for coronavirus, and how much is it just to protect their identity? Because of course they don't want to be identified, because everybody that you see here is therefore subject to a £60 fine or £30 if paid within 14 days. I mean, more than that, because 2 people have been arrested. Only 2, bear in mind, but still 2 people, and this isn't for breaching coronavirus restrictions, as it seemed that this law was just waived in this regard, which in one way is nice to see that then the government is beholden to the people in terms of saying, if you have a ridiculous rule or law like this, then we will break it so much that you cannot enforce it, which is good to know, and why you have things like the restriction on alcohol and the whole prohibition movement, that was eventually lifted because it just couldn't be contained. People were going to break that rule too much, that law too much, and so of course alcohol was made legal again in America. And hopefully this is a watershed moment that after this we'll think, well, yeah, then I suppose we don't need the social distancing lines. That surely after this then you would expect the cases of coronavirus in any of these places which have been affected by these riots, not protests but actually riots, to skyrocket. They must go through the roof. And as you can see, the police aren't wearing facial protection either, and yet this is supposed to be like the second coming of the Spanish flu. This is supposed to be really horrific and be such a deadly thing, and that's why we had to shut down our economy for so long and stop people from being able to make a living and live. And yet it seems that this isn't actually a problem, and we haven't seen the cases of coronavirus skyrocket in America. And we're not going to see it over here either, just like we haven't seen it happen in Japan where they haven't locked down. And it seems that these issues are heavily outweighed for the people who are trying to suggest that racism is systemic. I know some say systematic, but that's not what they mean. They mean systemic. Systematic means that it's going like one step after the other. It's a systematic, mundane, logical process. Systemic means that it is imbued within the system, and that is what they're getting at here. So they mean systemic when they say systematic, but bless you, can't expect them to understand words. The second part of their protest, which was more of a protest, is taking a knee and having their hands up and just prostrating themselves towards black people. That they've been trying to say, we want the white people or everyone that isn't black to prostrate themselves in front of the black people, and of course reciting chants as well as it comes to some sort of a religion in order to try and ingratiate the white people to the black identitarians. But of course none of this will ever be enough. And you've had various people speaking out, of course, including John Boyega, spouting absolute horseshit, and this keeps going back to the legacy media actually encouraging such a lying response the whole time, that seems to be all that they're good for and all that they support. And by suggesting that this is something worth saying, I mean, thankfully, John Boyega is aware enough to realise that, by saying these things, it might mean that I don't have a career anymore. And that's definitely true. Because he's trying to suggest that, there's such a big problem in America as well as in England, where, although, of course, there were 10 million arrests in America, only 17 unarmed black people were shot by police, compared to, of course, 6,000 black people killing other black people. And if you look at crime like that, if you wish to break it down on the race groups, then it's a really stupid idea for the black identitarians to do. The most violent group is, of course, the black on black killings, followed by black on white, and then trailing far behind is white on white. And then, of course, white on black as well, if you wish to include that. And we have seen police in America, of course, being killed, being shot, and attacked as well. That you've now had the estimates, which seems to be about 24 people who have been killed because of these riots. Directly because of these riots in America, we've seen 24 people killed because of one person who died in police custody. You've now got 24 people killed directly because of riots. And that's why the National Guard is mobilized, and there is actually a majority support for the military intervention to stop these riots as well, because that seems to be what is required. And now New York is in turmoil about who's calling the shots about what, because they want to be seen to be doing something, because that's what government always wants to do. But then who's going to take the credit, because they don't want to be suggesting that they're using the police and the National Guard and the army to attack black people, because they're too wrapped up in that they're concerned that's going to be the narrative. And that's why I think that they're trying to say that it's white supremacist rioters, in order to then try and validate the idea of utilizing military forces in order to quash the rioters. Don't know how well that'll plan out, but that seems to be what they're trying to do. And we've got, bloody hell, not only the media playing along, but also the Met Police. The Met Police Commander Alex Murray said it had been peaceful as a whole. Not exactly what I suggest when you see people throwing objects, physically hurting people, attacking them, destroying property as well. This is not what you would expect from a so-called peaceful protest, or largely peaceful. And there are photos everywhere, there are images everywhere. And when you have these rioters acting in coordination with others that are therefore leaving bricks around in order to then be used later on, and when people are suggesting, but they're just like water bottles being thrown, that doesn't mean anything, except when you've got quick drying cement within those water bottles, because the idea is then that you are throwing rocks, and that bricks are left around so that the rioters then go, there are some bricks here, we might as well use those. And as we've seen with, I think it's caustic acid in things like milkshakes, that you don't know what is being thrown at you, other than something is being thrown at you with the very least an intent to intimidate, but quite possibly to maim or seriously injure you. That when these things happen, of course you're going to see quite a strong response. And apparently this is supposed to be similar to the death of George Floyd, for example, who wasn't killed by the police officer. He died in police custody, sure, after, of course, a criminal career, as is to be expected, after being arrested for a crime, as is to be expected, while heavily intoxicated and suffering from everybody's favourite comorbidities, like high blood pressure and heart disease, while intoxicated on drugs. So the idea that this shock would kill him is really to be expected. And then they're trying to, of course, bring in people like Trayvon Martin and what happened there. And it's like, what, the career criminal who started in high school, and then when George Zimmerman, the police officer, then followed him because he was told to not confront him, so he didn't. He was then confronted by Trayvon Martin, punched in the face, punched to the ground, fractured his nose, several bruises and lacerations and cuts to the front and the back of his head, arguably a life-threatening situation, and then he defended himself while Trayvon Martin was on top of him, beating the crap out of him, and therefore the police officer shot him. That, you could say, yeah, but Trayvon Martin was unarmed. It's like, yeah, in which case the police should have higher PTU requirements so that they can overcome an attack like that. But in that situation, the guy couldn't really do anything other than either use his gun or die. And he decided that he didn't feel like dying that day. And therefore, he defended himself from a criminal who had just, of course, robbed a convenience store. So these examples that they're trying to throw out are ridiculous. These aren't innocent people who are dying in police altercations. It's never the case. And yet, we've got 24 innocent people who have died because of this. And there are more police officers killed than unarmed black people killed each year in America. About 50 or 60 per year. So, about 3 to 5 times as many police officers are killed than unarmed black people. So this whole thing is really just horseshit. It's all lies. And the most disgusting thing is the media trying to push this narrative to support it, which then results in far more damage to both property and lives. Of course, the property damage would then put somebody in terrible dire straits in terms of then trying to get enough money to live, or it could just directly kill them. So either directly or indirectly. And that's what we're seeing here. And with anyone who's got half a heart, any sense of morality, they cannot let this stand. And then, of course, you've got opportunistic rioters who are, just unhappy because they've been fed lies this whole time and therefore want to do something about it for a so-called injustice that they see, which is nothing of the sort. And it's as simple as that. Any of these examples that they throw out are easily refutable. It's all lies. All of it. And yet they're acted upon these lies. And that's why you need some stronger intervention in order to stop it, and also then get to the source and not just address the symptoms, but also understand that, hey, media, if you keep doing this, and if you're trying to push people to incite them into violence, then you're going to be held responsible as well if you are then inciting violence. And also understanding that the investment of $100 million, over $100 million, that was just in, I think, 6 years up to 2016, that has been put into the Black Lives Matter movement could have actually been put into entrepreneurial endeavours and the importance of family and that kind of advertising into black communities, and would have made such a bigger difference instead of into Black Lives Matter. So it doesn't seem like they want to help, but instead they wish to divide and conquer, and that is what they're getting at. And it is very, very malicious. But that seems to be where we are. So, hey, let's address the root cause of these problems, try and fix that, and then maybe we can move forward. For the time being, we gotta get the rioters off the streets. And I know the Americans are very grateful for their Second Amendment rights at the moment, and God, it would be very reassuring over here. Very reassuring. Because if they're going to waive their rules on coronavirus social distancing, then why not allow us some more self-defense, seeing as the police can't do a good enough job. But until next time, stay safe, do take care of yourself and the ones you love, and try as you can to have a good one.